Good morning. Welcome to the TRS investment meeting for November 4th, 2021. I'll start by calling the roll. John Adler,
I am here.
Thomas Brown,
Good morning, I'm here.
Natalie Green Giles,
She was going to be a little later today.
David Kazansky,
Present.
You have to raise it. Did you know who you are? Did you raise your hand?
Russell Buckley,
So Buckley here.
Deborah Penny,
I am here.
Susanna Vickers.
Here.
We have a quorum. I'll turn it over to the chairman.
Okay, good. Good morning, everyone. We will start out with Passport Funds, September 2021 performance review. Take it away, Mr. Fulvio.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. I hope all is well. Everyone should have the materials, and I'm going to begin with the September report. I'll start by just noting, as a follow-on from last month's discussion, September was a negative month for global equity markets. We saw markets in the U.S. fall by about 4.5%. Abroad, the fall was not quite as dramatic. Developed markets were down about 2.9%, with about a 3.5% to 4% fall for non-U.S. small cap markets. And then in emerging markets, we saw about a 3.94% decline, depending on the market proxy you're using. So what that meant in total was largely negative results for the passport funds during the month of September. You can see at the top of the page the diversified equity fund, which ended the month with about 19.3 billion in assets, had a negative 4.1% return. That was slightly ahead of the global market composite for that fund, which you'll note was down about 4.2%. The hybrid benchmark, which represents the underlying strategies benchmarks at target, was down about 3.9%. What we did see, which to some extent mitigates some of the negative results on an absolute basis, is that there were some positive relative results from different parts within the fund. So the defensive strategies composite did return about negative 2.7%, so protected in the down market. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Window washer in the
we're
background.
distracted by the window washer behind you.
I'm sorry about that. The defensive composite was down about 2.7%, so it did protect a little bit in the down market this month, as you can see, compared to the global market composite. The actively managed U.S. strategies were down about 2.7 versus the Russell 3 index. Versus that composite index, which was down about 3.1%. And in the international equity composite, you could see in aggregate that was down about 3.9, and that composite did lag its composite benchmark by about 60 basis points, 70 basis points. Year to date, calendar year to date, that is, the diversified equity fund ended September up about 12.8%. And you can see that that's modestly ahead of the hybrid benchmark, though does lag the global market composite, which I'll note includes the first 6 months of the year. That benchmark is reflective of the Russell 3000 index. The balanced fund had assets of about $587 million at the end of the month. That fund was down about 1.7%. Modestly behind the balanced funds composite benchmark for the month. Year to date, that fund has returned about 3.4%. The international equity fund, which I noted earlier, is similarly structured to the international equity composite, returned about negative 3.9% for the month as well. Year to date, that fund is up about 6.2%. The sustainable equity fund, with 532 million in assets at month end, returned negative 5.4%, very slightly ahead of its benchmark. Year to date, that fund has a 19.3% return and is about 5% ahead of its benchmark. Beyond that, the other two remaining passport funds are the two index funds. As you'll recall, the U.S. equity index has assets of about 77 million. That fund, in line with the broad US equity market, was down about 4.2%. And the International Equity Index fund was down about 3.3%, roughly in line with its developed and emerging non-US equity index. So I'll pause there and see if there's any questions on September before moving ahead to October, where I promise the numbers will be a little bit better. Okay, so not hearing any questions or comments, I'll ask everyone to flip over to the October report. And as you can see, October finished up on quite a high note. Particularly, we saw some positive results through the month, but even going strong through the end of the month. The global equity markets posted a pretty positive return of about 5.8%, 5.9%. That's the return for the global market composite benchmark during October. What drove that? Pretty strong results from US equity markets. US equities were up about 6.8% all told. The defensive composite benchmark was up about 4.5%. And the international part of the global equity markets, or I should say the non-US part of global equity markets, were also returned to positive return, not quite as strong as the US for the month. But you can see the MSCI EAFE index in the middle of the page up about 2.5%, and down at the very bottom, emerging markets up about 1%. So pretty strong month, definitely the strongest we've seen so far in the TRS fiscal year. And a good rebound from what we saw in September. Beyond the market returns on this page, you can see the underlying strategy for the sustainable fund was up about 9% in the month. That was enough to outpace its benchmark by about 0.5%. And beyond that, the underlying index funds for the other two passport fund options, also with positive results to the tune of about 6.7% for the US equity index and about 2.6% for the non-US equity index. So I'll pause there and see if there's any questions. I think we saw generally positive earnings, a little bit more mixed, but generally positive earnings announcements toward the late end of October, which certainly helped. And that's continued so far in what we've seen this week, in the first week of November. I'll turn it back to the chair.
Okay, great. Be unmuted. Any other questions or? Okay, all right, so then if I have a motion, we'll go into executive session. Do I hear a motion?
So
Amy
moved.
Kazansky, so moved.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Tom
Mr.
Brown, second.
Thank you, Mr. Kazansky. Thank you, Mr. Brown. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Russ, aye.
Any opposed? Any discussion? Okay, we're going into executive session. Oh, I haven't had my gavel in a while. Executive session. All right, will you please report out,
That
Ms.
was the
Stagg?
best.
Absolutely. In executive session, we received a presentation from a service provider. We discussed an updated investment policy within the variable funds and a specific implementation of said policy. A path forward was agreed to. We discussed a contract matter within the pension fund. We discussed 3 manager renewals and provided an update on recent transition activity.
Thank you, Ms. Stang. Is there anything else for public agenda? Okay, hearing none. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Tom Brown, so moved.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Do I have a second?
Susanna Vickers, second.
Thank you, Ms. Vickers. Any discussion? All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, stand adjourned. Use my gavel.
Thank you.
Okay, have a great day, everyone.